Hi, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing The Cactus by Sarah Haywood. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Catherine Manners. So this was a very fun book about a middle-aged woman. I believe she's in her early 40s or so, and she has led a very kind of isolated, small life. She has a steady job and she does some socializing. She has a sort of romantic partner, but she's kind of afraid of the world and doesn't really get a lot out of her life. And then she starts to experience a couple of major life changes and sort of take some initiative in her life and make things better for herself. So this was a really fun book. The main character lives in London and it is a very British book. I listened to the audiobook, which I highly recommend because the accents make everything that much better and that much more British. I loved that whole tone of it. And I had a great time just watching this woman bond with the people in her life. So I would highly recommend that you go read this book and then come back to hear my opinions. So I loved the character of Susan, and I related to her more than you're probably supposed to. You know, she's so isolated and doesn't have anyone in her life, but she's also very practical, and she manages to think things through really well, and she has a very pragmatic, well thought out approach to life, and I really admired that in her. She didn't have the best social skills at the beginning of the book, but I just admired her spirit so much, even if she did have quite a few flaws. She was definitely very good at lying to herself, especially at the beginning of the book when her mother dies, and she says she has no reaction, and the most you hear from her is later that day when a co-worker asks for a charity. She suggests he donate to the same illness that killed her mother, but she doesn't really admit to herself how devastated she is, and she's like that in a lot of ways. She's not very good at communicating with herself. And she very much thinks that she doesn't want more out of life and she's fine with her life the way it is, but she's not. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so excited about having a baby. And she's kind of surprised when she finds out that she's pregnant, that she wants to raise a baby and she wants to be a mother. And in a way, it's kind of good that she knows how to lie to herself, because she would never really admit outright that this is what she wanted from her life, but now that she has the opportunity, she's very happy to take advantage of it. I loved her relationship with Rob. You knew from the moment they met that they were going to get together and he was going to be the love interest. It was so much fun to watch them together, and just the kind of banter, and to see her kind of be thrown off by how much she enjoyed spending time with somebody and feeling connected to him, and that made her feel uncomfortable, and it was just great, and I loved watching them together. And it was fun to see her not willing to admit how much she wanted to spend time with him, but she really did, and she went to all the effort to make that dinner for him. And just seeing her getting close to him and having so much fun with that. She did a great job throughout the book of getting closer to people. Her neighbor, and Rob, and her family to some extent. And Rob was definitely a good influence on her too. You know, it was great that he convinced her to let Richard be involved in the baby's life, because he had that perspective of being the father who wasn't allowed to see his child, and you know, helping her see that Richard really deserved to get to know his baby. And I loved her whole arrangement with Richard. I thought it was perfect that there were two people who both managed to find each other, and they didn't want a full-on relationship. They had their one-day-a-week relationship, which was exactly what each of them needed. And it was so perfect that they could both ask for that and have that. And even though they weren't quite like other people, they could still have that. And then it was very good. They came up with a good solution by the end of it, you know, that he'll get to see the baby sometimes, it will live with her, and they came up with a good way to divide up time with their child. And it felt like by the end of the book, Susan had figured out how to make a much better life for her baby than she had, because Susan's childhood was so horrible. You know, at first you don't know why she's like this, why she's so isolated and shut off, and then you find out about her alcoholic father and the horrible way her mother handled it, how her mother just expected her to be the adult and didn't really give her any love, and gave all of her love to her brother. And it was just so heartbreaking to see all that Susan had gone through in her childhood. But then by the end of it, you know, she kind of was getting better with her family. She was on speaking terms with Edward. He drove her to the hospital when she was in labor, and she managed to talk to her Aunt Sylvie, who she found out was her biological mother, and kind of get to know her better. And it seems like, you know, they're making slow progress, and they'll get to be in each other's lives more, which will be really nice. And I loved, that the whole central focus of the book is she's fighting this court case with Edward. She doesn't want him to get their mother's house. She wants to kick him out. And then by the end of the book, she's found out that her mother wasn't her biological mother. And Susan goes to this court case and says, okay, I'm done. You can have everything. And the mediator legal lady is so shocked. That scene was just hilarious. And so by the end of the book, Susan has built a much better life for herself. She has good friends. She enjoys times with her coworkers. She is closer to her family, but she also doesn't give up any of herself because she is still a very fun character. She enjoys being kind of analytical and thinking things through, and sometimes in stories like these, characters tend to just abandon all of that and be exactly what society wants them to be, but Susan didn't do that. She was able to get a more rich and fulfilling life for herself without abandoning the essential parts of her, and she was still able to stay herself. So I had a lot of fun reading this book. It was really fun to go on this journey with Susan and see her kind of opening up her world and trying new things and being willing to expand and let more joy into her life. And I'm very glad that I read this book.